Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. Today I thought we could talk a little bit about the Manhattan Project, but more specifically, the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. I was recently at my parents' house in Tennessee, and we took a road trip to Oak Ridge to see the area and read up on it and everything. So just so you know, I have some maps, I have some tourist papers, and we're just going to kind of talk about everything that went on at the secret city of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And if you don't know, the Manhattan Project, it was a massive secret World War II program that created the first atomic bombs. And then they were tested in 1945 and used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending World War II, but also changing global politics and warfare forever. So I thought that might be just interesting to talk about. And I did grab some, maps. Well, this one's local dining. I don't think we'll need that one. Scratch that map. But this one is all the different sites you can see while you're in Oak Ridge. So we'll take a look at that too. Okay, so this is where we are. If you're not from the United States, Tennessee is here, and the area that they found to do to place the secret city was basically in the Appalachian Mountains, but really kind of off a little bit in the kind of wilds of Tennessee. And the government forced 3,000 families who had land, farms in the area, who maybe had it for generations, off of the land to build the secret city. Let me show you on this map, because it kind of has a better view, I think. Just unroll it for a second so you can see it. So in previous videos, I've talked quite a bit about Michigan. I did a video on West Virginia. Where else, guys? But anyway, now we are in the state of Tennessee, and I have actually done some videos on touring around Tennessee. But here is Knoxville. Over here is Nashville. Memphis is way over here. This is like Elvis. Let me get let's get one of these so we can. I don't think that one works all that great. I don't know where the black is. Okay. So right here is Oak Ridge. So here's Knoxville. So it's a little ways west, kind of slightly northwest of Oak Ridge. And you can see there's all these rivers. I'm not sure if you can see them, but right here is the river up here. And so they could dam the rivers, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and get a lot of electricity for this secret city that they're going to build. And that's part of the reason they picked the site of Oak Ridge. It wasn't called Oak Ridge at the time. Sorry, that was kind of loud. I think at the time it was called Wheat, Tennessee, and very, rural area. Let me set this aside. Okay, sorry about all that. All right, so we're going back in time to 1942. And at that time, Franklin D. Roosevelt is president of the United States. The United States has not yet entered the war, World War II, but some scientists were concerned that the Nazis, Hitler, was looking into, I think the wording, oh, by the way, I'm no expert. I have just been to Oak Ridge on a little tourist jaunt. I don't, and I watched the movies they had for the state park there. So please look this up on your own. I'm just giving you like my memories, basic overview of the situation. Okay, so there's scientists who are worried that the Nazis are going to start trying to figure out, I don't know if you call it nuclear fusion, or they were worried. And so a couple of them went to Einstein and said, hey, we got to work on this in the US. And they convinced Einstein to write a letter to FDR and say, we're worried they're going to create a weapon like we've never seen before, and we got to get ahead of this. And so Roosevelt took that pretty seriously. Now, at this time, Truman is his vice president. Actually, I take that back, because when it happened, I don't know, was he always his vice president? I'm not exactly sure. Scratch that. At some point, he was. Anyway, so FDR takes it seriously and says, all right, we'll start looking into this. Well, then, in 1941, Pearl Harbor happens. And Pearl Harbor is when the Japanese start bombing Hawaiian Islands. And like thousands of U.S. soldiers were killed. And that brings the U.S. into the war full on. Okay, so now we're to 1942. And Roosevelt has put a man named Colonel Leslie Grover in charge of setting up the Manhattan Project, which was the project to create a bomb unlike any we've ever seen in history. So he picks some sites around the country, but the one we're focusing on today is the Bear Creek Valley area, which later becomes Oak Ridge. And it was like a remote location. And the good thing is it was close to railroad lines. And it had just huge amounts of land available, like thousands of acres. And there was access to power from the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA's dams, like I showed you with all those rivers. So they had electricity aplenty. So, like I said, the government had these people who own the land leave. They paid them. There's some, when I looked it up, some people felt they did not pay them a fair price. They didn't give them any time to negotiate. They were like, you gotta go right now. But at the same time, a lot of people felt like if it's for winning the war, it's worth it. And some people felt proud later when they realized what their land was used for, that it had ended the war. So, I'm sure there are different stories about that. But they were given very little explanation. They were just told that it was to help end the war. Understanding, everybody, that a lot of young men were serving on foot, and people wanted this war over, obviously. Okay. So within 2 years, they built the secret city. Let's write that down. Secret city. And it was called that because it was literally a secret. If you worked on this city, you were not allowed to tell anybody what you were doing or where you were. Any letters that went out were just addressed, you'd say like Jane Doe, and then I think it was Clinton Engine Works. And that was your address. And you put your stamp on there. And all your letters were checked before they could go out. And if they said anything that gave away any kind of location outside of Clinton Engine Works, or you could maybe say you were working in engineering near Knoxville, something along those lines, anything beyond that, they would take the letter, but also you could get fired from your job. So they had signs all over. I should have brought my iPad to show you some signs that were basically like, anything you hear here, anything you see here, anything you do here stays here, or something like, you know what I mean? Those kind of signs, like, keep your mouth shut. Even though nobody who worked there really had any idea what they were doing. They just had no idea. Very few people knew what they were doing. And that was one interesting thing about having, they had like people working in Tennessee and Washington State, New Mexico, I forget where else, but anyway. And so they were all doing sort of different parts of the project, but nobody had any idea what they were doing. Okay, so they're all at Clinton Engine Works. Now, within 2 years, the population went from nobody. I mean, there were the 3,000 people who lived in the area. They were kicked out. Some of them came back and worked for it, actually, but within 2 years, they went to a population of 75,000. And it actually, during its height, became the 5th largest city in all of Tennessee, even though it didn't exist on a map. You couldn't find it on a map, and nobody really knew about it. The city was surrounded by fences, and there are two guard posts. And you can see those, at least one. Let's see, is still around. I thought it was on this map. Hold on. I swear it's on this map. Oh, no. They say, oh yeah, Turnpike Gatehouse. That's that. Let's see what they say about it, because on the back, I think they tell us. During the Cold War, multiple gatehouses controlled access to Oak Ridge's secure uranium enrichment facility. We haven't even gotten into that. I gotta get into that. Now standing sentry on the turnpike, access to the Oak Ridge system of greenways is available nearby. Yeah, you drive right by that when you drive through town. Okay. So they have 75,000 people there. It's all fenced in and guarded. It doesn't appear on any map anywhere. It's so top secret. And the reason is because they are working on enriching uranium. And what they're trying to figure out is okay, so natural uranium, and this is just my very basic understanding. Like, I'm not science at all, but I did watch all the movies and read science. But anyway, natural uranium is U-238, okay? But what they need for the atomic bomb is U-235. Uranium-238, uranium-235 isotope. Okay, don't ask me. I don't know. But that's what it said, isotope. Okay. I know I learned this in high school, but I wasn't really paying attention. Now, the problem is U-235 and U-238, they're like chemically identical. So they must be separated using like this massive industrial process. And I mean massive, at least in the 1940s. I think even still now. So they were trying out 3 different methods. Now, when they were doing this, they didn't know if it would work. They just didn't know. And they didn't know which would work. So that's why they went ahead and did all of them. Because they wanted to make sure something hopefully would work. Now there's more plants and I'm going to talk about here, but we're going to focus on the ones that I read most about when I was on the tour. But then later I noticed maybe there's others, so forgive me if you are very knowledgeable about this. This is like so basic, okay? But there was the plant called the Y12, and this used electromagnetic sorry, I have to concentrate when I spell separation. Okay, so this used magnets to pull. I don't know if I'm gonna I don't think I could explain this, but it's somehow like, I think that 235 is lighter than 238, and somehow the magnets, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure, but this is what this used. And the interesting thing is they had mostly these very young women who were like right out of high school, a lot of them. They were like 18, 19, and so they had lots of pictures of them. And basically they watched these gauges, and if the gauge did anything outside of normal, they were to report it. And at first they tried having kind of more knowledgeable people apparently run the gauges, but they would try to fix it or say what they thought was wrong with it, when really all they wanted was people to watch them and say if they go out of range. That's it. So they really liked having these completely people who don't know anything about it, right? So they had thousands of young women watching the gauges. But this Y12, this version, is what ended up being used for the bomb Little Boy, which was the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima by the Enola Gay. And they do have, like a recreation, I guess, of Little Boy there you can look at, and all about that, and you can, watch it. So that was the Y12 plant. But like I said, they didn't know which version they were going to end up using and finding the most success with. So they had multiple plants, and one of them was the K25 building, which you can go so I don't, maybe you could go to the Y12, but I'm not, see, it's Y12, it's still restricted. They do have a Y12 History Center. We didn't go all the way down here. We went to the science, they have a science center where you read about a lot of it. And then we drove out to the K25 History Center and the K25 Overlook. And that is interesting. And they have a whole model of the K25 building, which I'll tell you about right now. So that's out that you go past the gatehouse and you keep going out. And the K25 building was, at the time, the largest building in the world. That's how big it was. In the world at that time, under one roof. And it was 4 stories tall. And they had, in a lot of the displays, bicycles that they showed that people would use just to get around the building, because it was so big it would take you forever to walk. So they'd ride bikes around. And in this place, in the K25 building, they were working on what was called gaseous. Oh, did I spell that wrong? I don't know. Diffusion. So this took uranium, and this is kind of my understanding, turns it into gas. The lighter uranium will fall into this lower chamber, and the lighter will fall in the upper chamber, and the heavier will fall into the lower. The one they want is the lighter. But for every time they do it, they only get a teeny tiny. So like, basically there's a chamber here that captures some, and there's a chamber here. So the heavier uranium falls here. The lighter stuff that they want goes in here. But every time they do it, they get tons of heavy and only a tiny bit of light. So that's why they had to have this building just be massive. And they had tons of it going through. Could I be wrong about this? Yes, because I don't understand science that much. But I tried to tell you so I could tell you about it. But feel free to look it up and tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But I think that's the story. So that's why this K-25 building was just massive. It was just like an enormous industrial operation. Now I'm thinking about it. It may have had to do more with like this would move slower and this would move faster, and that's why I went in here. I don't remember exactly. But you would have to just keep repeating this process, repeating to get enough of the U-235 isotopes that you want. So they had to just keep running it through. And again, this was a situation where you had to have thousands of people keeping an eye on, one chamber. But there were, like I said, it was the largest building in the world at the time, 4 stories tall, and there were just one after another. Okay, I think that explains K-25 building. Okay, hopefully. I'm sure I'll remember more about it. So now we have the Y12 building and the K-25 building. And the other building, do they even mention it? Because I feel like it came up in the movie I watched. Interesting, I don't even see it on here. But it's the X10. And the X10 was a graphite reactor. Am I within camera view? Yeah. Oh, whoops, shoot. Now, this was the world's second nuclear reactor. And it was sort of a pilot plant for the plutonium production, which was happening, I think, in Washington State. And so some of what they did here was train workers to then go to the larger Hanford site in Washington State, is my understanding. But that was like another of the big things they were doing there. So this was more like a plutonium, which is what they used for the other bomb. Well, actually, they used the plutonium type bomb because there were 2 different types. There's the plutonium, I don't know what you call it, like fueled, I don't know. And then there's the enriched uranium. The plutonium they used for the bomb known as the Gadget. I don't think it was from Washington State, but this was sort of a training ground for that, I think. And the Gadget is the bomb that, if you saw the movie Oppenheimer, out in New Mexico, where they did the Trinity test. And that was in 1945. They were using plutonium. And then also the bomb that they used on Nagasaki, Fat Man, was plutonium. But the one that they used on Hiroshima, Little Boy, was uranium, enriched uranium. Okay. Are we all clear? This took me a minute to understand. So the interesting thing about Little Boy is that they had tested the plutonium version which you can look them up. The way they explode is a little different. One's like a, I don't know, like a, one's more like an whatever. You can look it up because I didn't go into that. But the gadget, the plutonium one, was tested at Trinity. And then they used that for Nagasaki. So they knew they had tested this one. The little boy, which ran on uranium, enriched uranium, they had never tested. And the scientists were just very confident that it would work. So, oh, that reminds me of another story I heard that I thought was interesting. Yeah, so they had never even tested this type of nuclear bomb until they put it, dropped it. But the day they were going to release this, the Enola Gay was going to drop the bomb, there was another target. A different island was their target. But it was so cloudy over that island that they just changed it while in flight to Hiroshima. I think that's right. It could have been this one, though. Now I'm confused. But it was one of these. So, like, one island didn't get it, and the other island did. Anyway, so this obviously changed the world. Now we deal with this. And in Iran, when we were talking about the other day about Pickaxe Mountain, they are working on enriching uranium. Seems to be what's happening under these mountains. But it's really different now. They can use systems that use way less electricity and energy. I don't know much about that, but it's something I saw. Okay. So that's what they were doing. Now, the workers who were there, they had no idea what was going on. They didn't know what they were working on. Mostly they thought they were probably making like some kind of synthetic rubber or something like that for the war. And it took, they didn't just build like, what's the word I'm looking for? Industrial complexes. They had to build housing for all these people. So it was just this massive undertaking. And they built all these communities with houses and movie theaters and schools and churches and a bus that went around town. They had shopping. But there was also a fence that went around the whole town, and there were gates, and you couldn't go in or out without a badge at the checkpoints. And like I said, they were reading everybody's mail, and censoring it basically. But one of the big things that they really did a nice job of showing at the museums was Tennessee this is 1940s Tennessee. They had Jim Crow laws, and segregation was the law. So they had dormitories basically for black men, and very little housing for black women or their families. So they were kept black people were kept in I don't know where on this map, but like the white people had these communities, like I said, with all these swimming pools and all this stuff. But the black families were kept outside of there and were separated. The men were separated from the women, even if they were families. And like the children couldn't go to the same schools, and they couldn't go to the swimming pool, and they couldn't, it was full segregation. So that was interesting. And in general, like the black men were given more labor-intensive jobs like janitorial and laundry and manual labor. So that was happening during that time, even though black men were also in the U.S. military fighting. So anyway, there's that. In 1955, though, Oak Ridge High School became one of the first high schools to integrate after the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision. So that was kind of interesting too. So that's sort of a thing, but you can still see a lot of the, not a lot, but there is some of the old housing, you know, they had apartment buildings, they had houses, all kinds of things. So let's see, on this map, we have the Children's Museum of Oak Ridge. When my kids were little, we used to go there. And it was, and I don't know if this is still true, but it was in an old school. And it was very like, kind of a lot, kind of like made, like handmade almost. I don't know what to say. There'd be like a room that would pretend like you're looking at your second grade classroom, but they've made it into a rainforest with a trail, and they're like stuffed monkeys, and oh my God, my little boys loved it. And then there was one room, like imagine an old cinder block wall classroom, and somebody had built a 2-story, almost like a dollhouse, but it was 2 stories, so you could walk around it. I don't know what you call that. And that was really cute. And then there was like old, you know, like history of Tennessee, like wagons and things like that. But the part my boys liked best is the old gymnasium. You could go in there and they had balls and stuff. So they could just, I had 3 very, very, very rambunctious and active boys. And they could just run around that gym and shoot baskets, and just, we would spend hours just letting them run like wild children. So that was fun. I don't know if it's the same as it was then, but that's how it was, you know, 15 years or 20 years ago. Oh gosh, I don't know. All right. So then we have the Turnpike Guest House here. And I keep saying guest house. My gosh, my brain. Gatehouse. That's where they would check your badge if you were working there back then. And then here, and they say it's a little off the map, it's like 10 miles up this way, is the K-25 History Center. That was really good. They have a cute thing where they give you a badge when you walk in, and then you go in and they have a film, and the guy, he's talking to you like you are a worker, and he says, this is top secret, you know, basically like loose lips sink ships, you gotta do, and you have to use your badge everywhere you go. And that was fun. It was kind of fun. And then they explain to you that like you'll have a job, and your job is very important to the war effort, and you must never tell anyone, even your spouse, what your job is. Like, it was very top secret, even though nobody knew what they were doing. And then right behind there is a building, and it has an upstairs where you overlook the original K-25 grounds. So here's the building, and here are the grounds. I mean, they're massive, you know. But I think because, I don't know if it's because uranium was on them or what, but they've had to tear down the buildings completely. So you just see like the footprint of the old building here, you know what I'm saying? But it's a very pretty view. It's like all glass. And then in here, they have a model of what the building looked like and signs that tell you what they did in there. So I found that, I found this whole area very interesting. I was very glad we went there. And inside of the History Center, they have a museum that really talks about like the segregation. It talks about all the different jobs people had, and it has like the bicycles, and they're telling you how they had to ride bikes. It's a lot of interesting things. The George Jones Memorial Baptist Church. I thought that this was like George Jones' singer, but it's not. Wrong. This church was the only building that was from before, when it was just the town of Wheat, I think it was called. It stayed standing, although I think they have replaced the building now, but it was the only building that stuck around. I don't know, we can read about it on the back. International Friendship Bell. I don't know about that. Secret City Commemorative Walk. I didn't go to those places. The Chapel on the Hill. I didn't go there. Alexander Guest House. I don't know. Historic Jackson Square. The Oak Ridge History Museum. I didn't do any of these, so I can go back still. American Museum of Science and Energy. Now, this used to be one of my, I loved this. We used to go to the Children's Museum and the Science and Energy Museum when my boys were young, and we really liked this. But they have moved it to this shopping mall, and it was very dark in there. It was okay. But I kind of liked it better before. I feel like it was more inviting before than it is now. It's just so dark in there. I don't know. And then the New Hope Center, but this has a lot of the information about, the whole thing. Okay, let's just look real quick at some of these things I don't know about. What is this Alexander Guest House? The historic guest house was built in 1943, so after Secret City was in, to house official visitors during the Manhattan Project, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, General Leslie R. Groves, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, and many others. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. That reminds me of something, actually. We went to see this. It was in the Science Center. They had a movie. We kind of had to request it, to be honest, because they have this area where they have like movies. And my husband went and said, "Are they going to have a movie today?" Because, my mom and dad would like that. And they said no. And then somebody came out and said, "Yeah, we'll do a movie." And as soon as they announced it, all 7 of us who were in the museum at the time ran in there to watch it. But anyway, one thing they said during that movie is that Roosevelt was president. Now he died right after he was elected again, right? I think that's right. And Truman was his vice president. And I thought this was interesting, that Truman had zero knowledge of the Manhattan Project and also a lot of things to do with the war. He was completely kept in the, dark on all of it, which I just thought was interesting. So it was, they said 2 weeks after he was sworn in, 2 weeks, they told him about the Manhattan Project. I was like, 2 weeks? It seems like a long time. But anyway, and he said they had some quote from Truman, like he was very surprised that all this stuff was going on. He didn't know. Isn't that weird? Isn't that kind of weird? It makes you wonder, like, how much Vance knows right now. Like, does he know anything? Because I would have thought the vice president knows everything, but I guess not. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Anyway. Okay. The other one I want to read about, this George Jones. Let's see what they say. The only remaining building of the pre-Manhattan Project community of Wheat, Tennessee. On the greenways surrounding the church, visitors can find building foundations, a cemetery, and other reminders of a once thriving community from the late 1800s and early 1900s. That's interesting. I did read that all the cemeteries, because, back then, if you owned a piece of land, you might put your family cemetery right on your piece of land. And so there'd be these little family cemeteries around, or at a church like this, they'd have one. And even when they built this huge thing, they left all the little cemeteries intact. That's what I read. I don't know if that's... This K-25 overlook says, located where the Happy Valley construction camp once stood, the overlook provides a clear view of the K-25 site. The uranium, the uranium enrichment gaseous diffusion plant that operated from the Manhattan Project through the Cold War. That's right. This one became even more important post-war. Exhibits provide a better understanding of K-25, Happy Valley, the Manhattan Project as a whole, and its lasting impact on the region. Yeah, this ended up becoming a very important site through the Cold War. That's right. And even to this day, there are tons of like science and engineering centers there. I'm sure it's full of smart people. That's what the lady at the Science Center told us. The museum tells, oh, this is the K-25 History Center. The museum tells the story. Wait, did I just read that? I don't think so. The museum tells the story of the K-25 gaseous diffusion plant. Through artifacts and interactive exhibits, visitors can learn about the science and engineering behind the K-25 plant, its role in the Manhattan Project and the Cold War, and the thousands of workers who constructed and maintained the site. So this church, the Chapel on the Hill, was built in 1943. Yeah, they don't even have on here the other, the Y12, do they? Well, what does this say? The New Hope Center, Y12 History Center. Okay, I guess I can go out there. The New Hope Center at the Y12 National Security Complex contains a public museum dedicated to one of the original production facilities of the Manhattan Project, the Y12 plant. Exhibits tell the history of the New Hope community, the science behind Y12's calutrons, and Y12's current role in the U.S. nuclear program. I didn't. Yeah, it's still active, I guess. Huh. Anyway, it was all very interesting, and I feel like I learned a lot actually going there. And then I was like, why was it called the Manhattan Project? Well, it's pretty simple, really. The very first meeting they had to discuss the idea behind all this took place in Manhattan. And that's why it's called that. The Manhattan Project. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Maybe. So they, would always say they worked at Clinton Engine Works. They were trying to get U-238. I don't know how to explain it, but anyway, they needed the U-235. So this is the natural, and this is the version they needed to have with U-235, which I guess would be considered enriched uranium, ? I think that's right. So it was called the Secret City. Oh, I know what else. So after the war, after they dropped the bomb pretty quickly, I think, the United States government announced that this had come out of the Manhattan Project, and talked about the secret city. And so then all the workers knew that they actually had been building this, had been helping to build the nuclear bomb and end the war, I guess you could say. So they liked the location because it was near rail lines, railroad, and there was just huge amounts of open land they could work with. It was sort of hidden in the mountains, kind of not near any. It was nearish to Knoxville, but far enough out that it was sort of secret. And they had access to plenty of electricity. There was the Y12 building that did electromagnetic separation, and that ended up the U-235 from this electromagnetic separation was used for Little Boy, which was the bomb dropped by the Enola Gay on Hiroshima. They had the X-10 facility that was a graphite reactor that worked on plutonium. And I don't have all the details on that. But some of those people were then sent to Washington State. And that is what was used for the Fat Man and the gadget for the Trinity test, I believe. And then there was the huge K-25 building, which at that time was the largest building in the world under one roof. And they were working on gaseous diffusion. So there you go. That's Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And it later became called Oak